Hi, I'm Amy Stasiewicz, and welcome to the Minutes. Thanks for listening today. It's great to have you along on the Minutes for the week of March 23rd. This is the City of Thunder Bay podcast. The Minutes takes a look at what happened at standing committee meetings and city council meetings. You can find the Minutes wherever you get your podcasts, including our YouTube channel and our website, thunderbay.ca/theminutes. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an update. This week, both the Growth Standing Committee and the Quality of Life Standing Committee met. Some agenda items from these meetings included a presentation on Thunder Bay's welcoming community for newcomers analysis, a closed session on property-related matters, an update on the poverty reduction strategy, a project summary on the City Studio pilot, and finally a report on the revised emergency response plan. We'll go over the main takeaways from both standing committee meetings. Then I'll sit down with Robert Wark, Thunder Bay Fire Rescue's CEMC and Division Chief of Administration to talk about Thunder Bay's emergency management program. So let's get started. Like all meetings, the night began with a land acknowledgement and then right into the agenda. First up was the Growth Standing Committee, which featured a presentation from Jamie Taylor, CEO of the Community Economic Development Commission, and Kelly Robertson, the city's Commissioner of Community Services. They shared insights from Thunder Bay's welcoming community for newcomers analysis. Thunder Bay is currently experiencing one of its largest periods of immigration in recent history, bringing positive impacts to both the local economy and workforce. The analysis, based on a study conducted by IRCC and supported by Environics, identified 5 key characteristics of a welcoming community, which include housing, healthcare, transit, community services, and childcare. These areas were highlighted as especially important by newcomers through surveys and direct feedback. While the study found that many newcomers are satisfied with these services, it also identified opportunities for improvement. Strengthening these areas can help make Thunder Bay an even more welcoming place, supporting efforts to both attract and retain newcomers. Ultimately, fostering a welcoming community doesn't just attract new residents, it also helps ensure they choose to stay and build their lives here in Thunder Bay. Next up was the reports of administration. There were 2 reports in closed session on property-related matters. The recommendations from Standing Committee will go to Council for final approval on April 7th. All right, so that's it for growth meeting updates. Next, I'll be giving a recap on the Quality of Life Standing Committee meeting. The Quality of Life Standing Committee began with a presentation from the Lakehead Social Planning Council on their Poverty Reduction Strategy Annual Report. The LSPC brings agencies, governments, and partners together to tackle poverty as one united team. Thunder Bay relies on LSPC to keep poverty reduction organized, connected, and moving forward. Some of their projects and initiatives include 211 Ontario North, low-income support programs, and utility support programs. Then on to the reports of administration. The first report from the city's administration was a project summary on the City Studio pilot. City Studio launched in 2023 as a partnership between the City of Thunder Bay, Lakehead University, Confederation College, and NASM. The goal is to connect students with real-world city and community projects so they can gain hands-on experience while contributing to local priorities like community safety, well-being, and growth. Over the course of the pilot, the program supported 172 projects and engaged nearly 1,200 students. It also brought together faculty, city staff, and community organizations, showing just how much interest there is in this kind of collaboration. Beyond the numbers, the program helped build stronger relationships across sectors, expanded opportunities for civic engagement, and gave students valuable, career-ready experience. It also supports talent retention by helping students see opportunities to stay and work here in Thunder Bay. The report also highlighted a few areas for improvement, like better aligning academic and city timelines and strengthening data sharing and coordination between partners. Overall, City Studio has created a strong foundation for ongoing collaboration. The next step is looking at how to sustain and grow the program beyond its current funding, as it continues to evolve into a hub for civic innovation in the community. The final report of administration for the Quality of Life Standing Committee meeting was an update from the Thunder Bay Fire Rescue on the revised emergency management program. The city is working to strengthen how it handles emergencies by introducing an updated emergency management program. This program will guide how the city prepares for, responds to, and recovers from situations like natural disasters or other major events. The updated program includes two main parts. First, the emergency management strategy, which sets the overall direction and priorities. Second, the emergency response plan, which clearly outlines who does what during an emergency and how different teams will be working together. One of the key reasons for this update is to apply lessons learned from recent events, especially the COVID-19 pandemic. While the city handled the pandemic well overall, the review identified areas for improvement, such as better coordination, more training, and stronger long-term planning. The new plan also focuses on modern approaches, like using Ontario's incident management system, improving communication between departments, and ensuring the city can respond effectively to both short-term and long-lasting emergencies. Another important aspect is the focus on resilience. This includes considering climate change impacts and ensuring support for vulnerable populations during emergencies. Overall, this update is about making sure Thunder Bay is better prepared, more coordinated, and ready to protect the community in any emergency situation. Standing Committee endorsed the revised plan, and it will now go to Council for final approval. Okay, that wraps up the recap for the Quality of Life Standing Committee meeting. Next up, I'll be joined by today's guest to talk more about the city's emergency management program. I'm here in the Minute Studio with Robert Wark, Division Chief of Administration and CEMC with Thunder Bay Fire Rescue, to talk about Thunder Bay's emergency management program and the city's emergency response plan, what it is, how it works, and what residents should know. Hi, Robert. Thanks for stopping by.
Hi, Amy. It's nice to be here.
Okay, so to start off, maybe you could explain a bit about your role with Thunder Bay Fire Rescue and how you're involved in the overall emergency response plan.
Sure. Okay, so my title, as said earlier, I'm the Division Chief of Administration and CEMC for Thunder Bay. That falls under the Thunder Bay Fire Rescue. So I have kind of two jobs in the department. I run or help run the facilities, make sure that the 8 fire stations in the training center are able to run. And then my other part of my duties is emergency management. And that is, so the CEMC portion of my job title is a Community Emergency Management Coordinator. And I typically explain that to people when they ask, that I am kind of the go-between the municipality and the province. So if we had something happen in the city that required us to stand up our emergency operations, and it wasn't something that the 3 branches could handle, being police, fire, and ambulance, then, or a specific department couldn't handle it, and it was going to expand to be something a little bit more serious, we would stand up our EOC, we would start dedicating more resources to helping.
Yeah.
And then if we knew that we were going to get to a situation where we needed to go further, we would activate the next level, which is we would reach out to the Provincial Emergency Operations Center, which is run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then we would request help from the Emergency Management Ontario. They would send out a field officer, and then we would have kind of a direct connect with the province.
Okay. So what is an emergency response plan, and what kind of emergencies does this plan prepare the city for?
So the best way to look at the emergency response plan is it's the framework that allows us to facilitate assistance if something were to go wrong. So that could be a natural disaster, such as a flood, a fire, something that expanded to the point where the existing structure can't handle it. So it's a massive fire that the fire department is struggling to control. It's a massive event that the police are struggling to control, and they just need access to more resources. And that's where the emergency plan or the response plan kind of builds out a framework, and there's some technical stuff, but basically for simplicity, there's legislation from the provincial side that says we have certain obligations as a municipality, and that's how we meet them, is to create the emergency response plan, follow the structure, and then all of the supporting documentation that comes along with it. So the response plan is very generic. It plans out kind of how you would do it and how you would go about it, but it leaves discretion to the individuals. So when we, for example, activated the Emergency Operations Center, everybody comes together, they get a feel for what's happening, and then we determine, okay, how are we going to intervene? And that might mean going to some of our supporting documentation. And the example I would give would be the flood from 2012. So they stood up the Emergency Operations Center at our old location, which is one of our tertiary locations right now at Station 3.
Okay.
And then they had the Emergency Operations Center operate for about 3 weeks straight. And so every individual had a position, and then they decided, they kind of helped on the ground stuff in the East End and Northwood, and then they determined how, where is the best way to, where is it best to put resources?
Right.
So does
Okay.
that kind of answer what you're
Yeah.
looking for there?
Yeah. And obviously we don't want the plan. It's good to have, but we don't want it.
So ideally, we never want it to
We never
activate,
want it to happen. Yeah.
right? But forearmed is a good way to say it.
Yeah.
So if we kind of have a plan in place and we have an understanding of some of the things that we are going to potentially see in the city of Thunder Bay, then we kind of plan for them, right?
Right.
And so that kind of talks into they refer to it as a HIRA, and that identifies all of our hazards, and it's a risk assessment. So we determine from there what's really, really got a good chance of happening and what has got a lower chance of happening. But then we kind of determine what we're going to do in those events. So that helps us with our supporting documentation.
Okay, amazing. Which organizations or agencies are involved in the plan, and how do they all work together?
So we typically have someone from all departments within the city. So if you can kind of think of the commissioner level, that's our municipal emergency control group.
Okay.
So you have someone from council, either typically the mayor or designate in the time.
Okay.
Then you would have the city manager. Then you would have someone from each typical group, including police, fire, and ambulance. And then once you've kind of expanded that out, so whatever the emergency is, we determine, so anyone on that MECG can call an emergency meeting. We get together, we get a quick assessment of what's happening, and then we might determine that it requires a response, but maybe it doesn't require all sections of the response. So that's where it starts to kind of tailor to the incident.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then if it involves an outside partner, so when we refer to outside partners like Synergy North or T-Baytel or the hospital or even the mill or the port, then we would potentially stand up in an effort to assist.
Right.
But then they would be running their own emergency, and then we would offer assistance if they required it.
Okay, yes. I didn't even think about like the port.
Yeah.
Yeah. Makes total sense. Okay. And are there practice drills or simulated emergencies carried out to test the plan?
So each year we're obligated to have a exercise, and they vary. Some of them are very involved. The last big one we did was in 2024.
Okay.
And it was based around a simulated heat wave. So the province recognized, so they can kind of give us ideas, and they say, well, in 2023, they had a really hot summer down in Southern Ontario, and they found that a lot of the municipalities were having to stand up cooling centers, similar to how we had some warming centers set up this winter.
Yeah.
And basically, that was the simulation. So it was testing our severe weather response plan, if that makes sense.
Right,
so that would be a supporting document to our emergency response plan.
Okay.
And then we just kind of, okay, so what are we going to do in that situation? Another great example would be evacuation. So if we had an event that occurred, say, in one section of the city, but it wasn't going to be enough to have us remove everyone from town, but maybe we have a small section that we have to address with, say, 50 homes or 100 homes. Well, then we would have what's called an evacuation plan, where they're going to go, where they're going to check in, and where they're going to register, and then we'll try to assist them as best we can until whatever the problems that's caused the displacement can be rectified.
Okay. And you said this happens, it must happen at least once a year.
Correct.
But it can happen randomly, like
So it's typically...
I don't want to say fake drill, but...
No, it's typically planned ahead of time. Last year's one, because it was a little bit more basic, because I'm newer to the role, we did a smaller event and it wasn't planned.
Okay.
Only a few people were in on it.
Yeah.
And it was more to test the procedure and test the process of activating the EOC, getting everybody together and sitting down and starting work.
Right.
Right. And recognizing that suddenly whatever you are doing in your other role is on pause for a moment because we're dealing with this emergency.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. And that takes priority, obviously.
Yeah.
Okay. And what training is involved? You mentioned there's so many different people involved depending on the emergency, but is there training for these people?
There is.
Yeah.
So it's a great question. So part of the reason that we've updated our response plan is because the province has changed some of the legislation around how operations and emergency operations are run. So we've gone to what's referred to as an IMS-based system, incident management system. So what that does is it allows us to be uniform across the province in how we tackle certain things. So the way that Thunder Bay does it is going to be similar to the way that North Bay does it, is going to be similar to the way Toronto does it or Mississauga does it, in that we're going to follow this structure, and that determines kind of your organizational chart. Now, where the subjectivity comes in is, what is the event that's triggering us to get together? Is it information sharing? Is it just preparing? We know something might be coming? Or is it we're actively in an emergency or a disaster, and what are we doing?
Okay.
And then there's actual forms that you fill out that document the process.
Okay. It's nice to know this is all happening behind the scenes. What you did kind of mention this, but what are some of the key updates or improvements from the last version of the plan?
So this brings us into compliance with some of the new legislation, and that is around some of the conformity to the IMS system and basically understanding how we would interface with the province. So their Provincial Emergency Operations Center, they do everything. They run 24/7. You'll often hear them talk about like a working cycle or a time frame or a time period. And initially they might be short, like the first 2 hours might be a cycle. But then as the event progresses, you may go into more like a shift style. So it would be an 8-hour rotation.
Okay.
And that way, when you come in for your shift to work in the EOC, here's all the information that's happened. Here's all the documentation. You got a few minutes to review it. And then you can have a handoff from the person. And then as most emergencies progress, they start to move from emergency to managed and then no longer an emergency. At that point, you may start drawing back and not having every person in the EOC, because they also have other roles in the corporation. So they're back at work, or they might be only coming in for short periods of time. So it really depends on the incident at the time.
Okay. And you're talking a lot about the EOC, which is the Emergency Operations Center. Can you just explain a bit more of what that is?
Sure.
Yeah.
So if anybody's watched probably any movies in the last 5 years, you'll often see they talk about like a situation room, or often they'll say, oh, we're in the EOC, and we're like, what's that short form for?
Right.
All it is Emergency Operations Center, and it's just the location, a physical location that you can go and you can bring together either the EOC members or the MECG.
Okay.
And they can get together, and there's typically, when ours was 20 years ago, everybody had a wired phone and ready to go. So the classroom that was the primary location over at Station 3, when you walk in, there's phone jacks all around the room. Why? Because we used to have physical hardline phones for everybody.
Right.
Obviously, technology has changed. Now we don't necessarily have that, but we have redundant systems built in. So when we create it, we know we have like 2 versions of the internet to get access to documentation. We have generators at our sites. So like Station 3, because it's a fire hall, has a generator. And if the power were to go out, Station 3 can still run.
Oh,
so we could still do things, right? So now part of the legislation is you can't just have one location, because what happens if that's where the emergency is? So we have several kind of backup locations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Does that kind of cover what you were looking for?
Yeah, no, that's very interesting.
Okay.
Okay, so how does the city communicate with the public during these emergencies?
It's a great question, because it is completely dependent on the event.
Right.
So, for example, the last question we talked about briefly, if the power was out. So if the power's out, it might change the way that we communicate with the public. Normally, we would do media blasts, we would do social media, typically handled by our EIO, which is our Emergency Information Officer, which is designated in our plan. But they're kind of someone in our PR side of events. So they kind of know how to interact with the media and how to gather the media. Typically, if it's something that's very serious, they'll have a schedule and they'll draw up a schedule that says, okay, on the hour or every 30 minutes, you're going to get updates. Here are the locations that are trusted information spots.
Okay.
If it's something that's less concerning, like we're not worried about life and limb, but we're still worried about, say, some infrastructure, it may just be periodic updates. But typically it will come from the city as this is an official release. And the reason we do that is to try to combat any misinformation that can get spread out once something happens.
Right.
Often it's one of the first things that happens is to start getting information out to try to prevent false narratives that happen that could unnecessarily scare portions of the population.
Yeah.
Right? So something serious is happening on, say, at the water treatment plant or over at the mill, and people in the area start to get a little nervous, and often there's organic groups that exist on Facebook and Twitter, and stuff starts spreading. Well, then sometimes it's not accurate.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that when anybody's making decisions, they're getting the most accurate information. So when we get it, we typically will release it as quickly as we can if it's going to impact the individuals.
Okay.
And if it's not, we may just give simple orders like, hey, there's an event in your area. We advise you to shelter in place, depending on the event. We just ask that you stay at your residence for now. Stand by for more updates.
Right. So. Yeah. Okay. For residents who are listening, what are some simple things they can do to be prepared in case of an emergency?
So you're probably going to see me in another month for emergency preparedness week in first week of May. But the big one that the province and the federal government will always hit on is to have a kit, a 72-hour kit. And it doesn't have to be fancy, but a 72-hour kit is probably one of the best things that any individual can do. And it's not for the reasons you think. It's because not every single person has the ability or means to create a 72-hour kit.
Okay.
So if an event happens and you can self-identify to a check-in process or to the city and say, I'm okay, I've got enough equipment or material, or I can leave and go to my friend's house that's in Kakabeka. Well, then we'll note the information, but we know we don't have to dedicate resources to your family and your house in that moment, and we can dedicate it where they're needed more appropriately in the moment.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and also, so a kit for your home, but also for your car, right?
So I actually advocate myself personally, and I think if you go back, you'll see that I've said this in the past. I'm a big fan of having a bag that's kind of got everything, and then when I travel, I just throw it in the car with me.
Okay.
And it's got some very basic items, but a can opener, some non-perishable canned goods, enough that I can get myself through with my family. So you kind of build it out. And if you go to getprepared.ca, they'll lay out exactly how you can
prepare your kit.
Build your kit.
Yeah, build your kit. Yeah.
But the big thing is you need enough potable water is roughly 2 liters per day per person. So you want to have a little bit of water. So what I do is I keep my water separate in a jug, but I keep the two things right inside the door of my garage. And if I need it, then I can just quickly take it. And if I don't need it, then I don't take it with me. But if I know if I'm going on a long road trip, it goes in the car with me.
Okay. I got to get my bag together.
To be fair, a lot of people need to get their bags together.
Yeah.
I only built my first one about 5 years ago, and it's slowly changed over time.
Right. Okay, great info. So that's a wrap. Thanks for the updates, Robert, and for taking time to come and chat with me today.
No problem. I really appreciate it.
Okay, that's it for this week's episode of The Minutes. A big thank you to Robert Wark, Division Chief of Administration with the Thunder Bay Fire Rescue, for joining us. If you want more information about City Council, agendas, or minutes, visit thunderbay.ca/council. You can catch the minutes every week wherever you get your podcasts, on our YouTube channel, or on our website at thunderbay.ca/theminutes. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an update. I'm Amy. Thanks again for listening to The Minutes, and have a great week.